All right, we got the Texas Longhorns coming up today. A whole series of videos I'm doing. I started a month or so ago. I'm going to do it right up until the start of the season, previewing and predicting as many teams as I can, game by game prediction. So, not just going to give you an overall record. I'm actually going to put the schedule up on the screen, go through it game by game, and tell you who I think Texas is going to beat, who I think they're going to lose to. We'll get to that in just a second. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the offense, a little bit about the defense, the coaching staff, some recruiting, things like that. And then we'll get to the schedule and my record prediction. Now, it would be impossible to exaggerate how bad of a season Texas had last year. And I'm not just talking about their record, which of course was really bad. I believe they were 5-7 overall. They started out 4-1. Things were going okay. I think they had an early loss to Arkansas, but were 4-1, but then lost 3 games in a row to Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Baylor. And in all 3 of those games, Texas had double-digit leads in the second half and blew all 3. So you're looking at a team that instead of finding ways to win games in second halves was finding ways to lose them. Of course, they ended the year with their longest losing streak in like 50 years, losing like 6 games in a row, including just a pitiful loss to a 2 or 3 win Kansas team. It was just an absolutely horrible year in Sarkisian's first year in Austin. He's clearly got to get it turned around immediately. Texas is not the type of place where you can be winning 5 and 6 games a year and losing to Kansas for more than really 1 year at a time and expect to keep your job. Now, Texas has had several coaches over the last decade or so. It's kind of been a revolving door, and that's kind of been the problem. One of the reasons I think it's been so disappointing for Texas, right? Obviously, you're Texas. You really should be winning 10 or close to 10 games a year, just about any given year. One of the reasons it's really hard to understand why over the course of 2 or 3 coaches, you can't even make a bowl game now under Sarkisian is because the talent is there. Texas has been recruiting in the top 10, top 15 nationally really forever. And even going back to the recruiting class that they just signed, coming off, like I said, probably their worst season in 50 years where they lost to Kansas, blew multiple second half leads. It's a 6-game losing streak, right? Even after as bad as that was, Texas still managed to sign a top 5 recruiting class in 2023. And this is one of the reasons why I think people are so hard on Texas is because they don't have Kansas talent. They don't have Vandy talent. Texas has elite talent. And for whatever reason, these recruiting classes and the talent that Texas has not been correlating to wins or production on the field. And that's something obviously that has to change. Now, to be fair, before I get into what I think about the Texas offense and defense coming up this season, and then, of course, the schedule and the prediction, I want to be fair. If you're somebody that watches this channel year-round and you paid attention during the offseason, then you know, for some particular reason, I am a lot higher on Texas in 2022 than almost anybody else I've seen on the internet. I don't really have any type of reason that I could articulate as to why. I mean, really, when you look at their team, the only thing you can really look at Texas and be certain about is their running back, Bijan Robinson. I mean, we're going to talk about the other position groups in a minute, but I call it I don't know if it's a hunch or what. And look, I do 40 or 50 of these prediction videos every single offseason. I've been doing this for years, and clearly I've been way wrong on teams before. And it's possible I'm wrong on Texas again, heading into 2022. But I just want to throw that out there. I am higher on Texas than almost anybody I've found. Even higher on Texas than a lot of Texas fans. But let's talk about the offense now. Last year's quarterback is gone, Casey Thompson. He transferred out, I believe, to Nebraska. Yeah, an okay year, nothing great. He transferred out. In comes Quinn Ewers, right? Now, he's a high school kid out of the state of Texas, reclassified, entered college a year early at Ohio State. Played at Ohio State 1 year. Didn't really play, was on the team at Ohio State 1 year last season. Actually only played 2 snaps all of last year as a true freshman behind Heisman Trophy candidate C.J. Stroud. He only got 2 snaps. They were both handoffs, so really hasn't done anything in college. Spent his 1 year at Ohio State, decided to transfer back home. He enrolls at Texas. And it's expected, at least by me, that he's going to get the start this year. They also have Hudson Card, who's a little bit older. I just feel like they're going to go ahead and roll the dice with Quinn Ewers. But we'll see how that plays out at the start of the season. So it's just questions, right? We know how good he was in high school. We know how highly rated he was. In fact, he's the highest rated quarterback to enroll at Texas since Vince Young. So there's reason to be optimistic, but just like with any recruit or transfer or whatever, until you see a kid actually do it on the field, it's hard to have 100% confidence. I think he'll be okay. And he's got a couple of good weapons to work with on the offensive side of the ball. I've already mentioned Bijan Robinson. I think he might be the best running back in all of college football. He's definitely top 2 or 3. I like Travion Henderson up at Ohio State. There's a few more sprinkled around. There's some really good running backs, but I'm really, really high on Bijan Robinson, over 1,000 yards last year. No reason to believe he won't eclipse that again this year. And when you look over the wide receivers, of course, Xavier Worthy comes back. He was amazing last year, really one of the lone bright spots on Texas's team last year, freshman record 12 touchdowns. And you have so he'll be a sophomore this year. And junior Jordan Whittington, kind of a third down receiver, possession type of receiver, right? And you bring in a Wyoming transfer. So you got some pieces there to work with offensively. As far as the offensive line goes, it's going to have to play a little bit better. But you could say that about almost every single position group on the team at Texas, right? When you go 5-7, that's a pretty clear indication that you need to improve in a lot of places, not specifically any one group or the other. Tight end from Alabama transfers into Billingsley is his name. So there's going to be some pieces and some talent to work with there on the offensive side of the ball for Texas. As far as the offensive line goes, you have a guard that returns, UNCLELOU, or I can't pronounce these people's names. Jake Majors is the center, Christian Jones at tackle. And you signed an amazing, we talked about last year's recruiting class. It's possible Texas is going to have to play 1, maybe even 2 freshman offensive linemen this year. Now, they brought in an amazing offensive line class. I think they signed 7 offensive linemen in last year's recruiting class. I think 3 of the positions are taken care of. The other 2 are kind of up in the air. We'll see how it shakes out during fall camp now that practice has started. But it's definitely possible that Texas ends up playing a couple of freshmen on that offensive line. Now, shifting over to the defensive side of the ball for Texas, it was worse than the offense. They were absolutely horrible. They gave up over 31 points per game. They gave up over 200 yards per game rushing. Rushing in an era of college football where people are slinging the ball around. People were running it down Texas' throat last year. Over 5 yards a carry Texas defense allowed last year, and their pass rush was basically non-existent. So really all 3 levels of the defense were horrendous last year. Now, the defensive coordinator comes back, so I guess that's good on one hand. You're at least you're not changing systems heading into this year. But how much of the defense's struggles could be blamed on the defensive coordinator, we're going to find out this year, because you got a lot of parts back from last year's defense and the defensive coordinator. You also bring some transfers in. You brought in a secondary guy from Ohio State. You bring in a linebacker from James Madison. I mean, you're trying to put some pieces together here with the transfer portal. Like I said, the recruiting has been pretty good at Texas, so there is some talent there. I am high on Texas, and I'll be honest, I am not too concerned about Texas offensively. I have a feeling Quinn Ewers is going to be okay. I like the wide receivers and obviously love Bijan Robinson. If I end up being wrong about kind of being high on Texas this year, it's going to be because of the defense. I'm on shaky ground here. With Texas when it comes to their defense. They would really have to make some huge leaps and bounds defensively if they're going to get anywhere close to where I think they can be in 2022. And let's talk about where I think they're going to be. Let's put the schedule up on the screen and we'll go through it game by game. All right, here it is, the schedule for Texas this coming up season. And as you can see, the sort of the game that everybody's been talking about when they talk about Texas coming up this year, that home game against Alabama in week 2. Obviously, Alabama is, cream of the crop in college football over the last 12 to 15 years. Really a very tough spot here for Texas. But you do get a warm-up game prior to that against ULM, the Warhawks. This is a game Texas not only has to win, Quinn Ewers has got to play well in this game in week 1. Quinn Ewers, thank God for Quinn Ewers and his mental stability that Texas isn't playing Alabama week 1. Alabama's good every year. Their defense is good most years, right? Their defense is unbelievable this year. Will Anderson and Dallas Turner on the outside. They're loaded in the secondary. They bring Eli Ricks in from LSU over there. I mean, they're just absolutely loaded everywhere on defense. Might be one of the best defenses Nick Saban has had in a while. Thank God Quinn Ewers gets a warm-up game here before he has to play Alabama. Because let's not forget here. Quinn Ewers has not played a game since, 2019? 2020 was a COVID deal. 2021, he didn't play last year. The guy hasn't played a lot. So you get this warm up against ULM. I do think obviously Texas will win that game. But again, that's not really the goal, or shouldn't be the goal. Well, obviously, the goal is always to win. Quinn Ewers has got to get some confidence, get comfortable, get used to what college speed, at least as much as you can against ULM. It's not going to compare to what he sees the next week against Bama. And I just tell you now, I don't see Texas winning that game. I'm sorry, I don't. As high as I am on Texas, and again, it's gonna be hard for you to find anybody on the internet other than Texas fans maybe that are higher on Texas than I am. They're not beating Alabama. So I don't know how much time you want me to spend talking about this game here, but the only advantage I see anywhere in this Texas-Alabama game in Texas's favor is the fact that it's played in Texas. Other than that, Alabama's got advantages in every possible matchup you could look at. I do think Bijan Robinson will be the best running back in this game, as much as I like Jahmyr Gibbs, the transfer from Georgia Tech that's now at Alabama. He's no Bijan Robinson. So, okay, so Texas will have the best running back in the game. But other than that, there's just way too many advantages for Alabama. So I think Texas starts out 1-1 in the non-con. Next non-con game, Texas school here, UTSA at home for Texas. Another big win for Texas. So Texas is going to be 2-1, and what you really are looking at here with this Alabama game is you don't want Quinn Ewers to be ruined his second game of his career with the beating that he's likely to take from that Alabama defense. I talked about Alabama's defense. I talked about Texas offensive line a little bit a few minutes ago. It's possible you're going to have a couple of freshmen playing there. It's a recipe for disaster. Texas needs to get to 2-1 heading into their conference schedule on the road at Texas Tech with Quinn Ewers' mental stability still intact. That should be the goal. First conference game of the season on the road at Texas Tech, a team with lots of new pieces, new coaching staff too, I believe, and I'm just not very high on Texas Tech this year. I'll just go ahead and tell you, yeah, it's a road game. Texas has got to win this game, right? If I'm going to be even close to right about Texas as far as how I'm feeling about them this year, they've got to win these games, right? And these are the games they lost last year. I mean, let's call it what it is. These were not guaranteed wins for Texas last year. In fact, they lost more of these games than they won. They got to get that turned around. Steve Sarkisian's a great play caller, to be determined yet. How he's going to work out as a head coach. I'm putting some faith and confidence in him with Quinn Ewers, Bijan Robinson, and those wide receivers. Like I said, I think they're going to be a lot better this year than they were last year. I think they close out those games this year that they lost last year when they had those big second half leads. Again, Texas had double-digit second half leads against the three best teams in the Big 12, Baylor, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State, and Texas blew all those games and lost them all, not to mention the loss to Kansas. I think you get the win on the road at Texas Tech. You come back home, you get to play West Virginia. West Virginia, also a team I'm not very high on this year. I know they brought in JT Daniels at quarterback, and it shouldn't be a secret if you know who I am. I love JT Daniels. I think he's a hell of a quarterback, and I think he'll have a good season at West Virginia. He's reunited with his offensive coordinator from back in his time at Southern Cal. JT Daniels originally enrolled and played at Southern Cal in what seems like forever ago now. That offensive coordinator is currently at West Virginia. So is JT Daniels. So sort of a back together again type of thing there. And I do think JT Daniels is good and will have a good season. I don't think West Virginia is good enough to beat Texas on the road. I think Texas gets the win here. And now we have the Oklahoma game. This is the game that I think will determine how the rest of Texas season goes, okay? I think they're going to take a beating by Alabama. The next really even decent team they play is here against Oklahoma. ULM's not any good. UTSA is not any good. West Virginia, sorry, not very good. And Texas Tech, I don't think is very good. So I think Texas is going to get mollywopped by Bama, okay? The next decent team you play is Oklahoma. Texas has got to win this game. From a psychological perspective, you can't start the season by losing to the only two good teams you play in the first 6 weeks of the year. Not to mention the fact this is a huge rivalry game, one of the biggest rivalries in all of college football. The Red River Shootout played every year at the State Fair there in Dallas. Texas has got to find a way to win this game. Should have won it last year. Problem is, there's a lot of years over the last 10 years or so where you could say Texas probably should have won it, and they find ways to lose it more times than not. Now, I've already done an Oklahoma version of this video, so if you've seen that video, and you know which way I'm going here, I'm going to give Texas the benefit of the doubt and say they find a way to beat Oklahoma with a first-year head coach there in Brent Venables, basically an entirely new offense. The defense, I do think, will be improved under Brent Venables, but I'm just not sure how much that defense can improve in 1 year. I don't think you can take a program that's had one of the worst defenses on planet Earth for 5 years in a row and turn it around overnight. So while I do think just having Brent Venables alone is enough to make the defense better. I don't think it's enough to make this a top 20, top 25 type defense. Texas should be able to move the ball on Oklahoma like they normally do. And Texas defense is going to have to come up with a stop or two in the second half of this game to get the win. I think they find a way to do it. Texas beats Oklahoma. Home game against Iowa State. If I was looking for a trap game on this schedule, this would be it. It's going to be a huge win for Texas against Oklahoma if it happens like I'm predicting that it will. You don't want to set yourself up for this letdown the following week. Iowa State not expected to be as good heading into this season as they were expected to be heading into last season. They're another team that was very disappointing last year, top 10 in the preseason, and then didn't do anything every single week but go out and find ways to lose, it seemed like. But they're going to be very well coached. They might not be as talented overall, or at least the perception is that they're not as talented overall as they were last year. Lost a lot of those seniors, very senior-heavy team last year, which is one of the reasons they were predicted to do so well. A lot of those guys are gone. But you get this big win over Oklahoma. Don't celebrate into Tuesday or Wednesday of that following week because Iowa State's a team that can beat you if that's what you do. I'm going to give Texas and that coaching staff, SARKISIAN, all them in year 2 now. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. I'm going to say they get the kids focused and prepared for Iowa State and get the win. Then you got to go on the road and play Oklahoma State. I think you slip up here. I'm giving you some games that are kind of 50-50, the Oklahoma game, maybe even the Iowa State game. Here I'm kind of taking one from you that's kind of 50-50. Would I be shocked if you beat Oklahoma State? No. They got Spencer Sanders back, but they lost the defense. He's the quarterback, but they lost their defensive coordinator, and that's a huge blow. They had like a top 5 defense last year. That guy's gone. Jim Knowles, I think his name was. He's off to Ohio State. Plus, they lost a lot of starters off of that defense too. I still think they're a really good team. I still like Gundy, the coach there, and you have to play them there. And Oklahoma State's definitely capable of winning this game. Oklahoma's also capable of beating you, Texas. So I'm sort of giving and taking here. I think you take the loss on the road at Oklahoma State. Then you get a much-needed bye week. You come out of your bye week, you got to go on the road and play Kansas State. Kansas State's been a little disappointing to me over the last couple of years. Now, there's some people that are talking about them a little bit heading into this year, that running back, Deuce Vaughn or whatever his name is. I do like him. I think he's a really good player. Might be the second best running back in the Big 12. I just don't think there's enough around him at Kansas State to really get them past maybe 7 or 8 wins. And Texas should not be losing to 7 and 8 win teams. I think Texas gets the win coming off a bye week, get the rest up there, an extra week to prepare. I think you get the win in Manhattan over Kansas State. You come back home and play TCU. Again, brand new coaching staff here. Lost who I think is their best player and running back Zach Evans to the transfer portal. He's at Ole Miss now. These are the games Texas has to win instead of lose. I'm giving Texas a win here against TCU. Revenge game on the road against Kansas. I've thought about trolling a little bit when I got to this game here. I'm not even going to troll. Texas will win this game. Kansas is horrible. 2-3 win team every single year. I don't even think they've won 10 games total in the last 5 years. It's absolutely horrible. I don't care that you have to play them there. Again, this is a game that Texas it's got to get to the point where you don't even have to think about this game if you're a Texas fan. Texas is getting ready to head into the SEC in a couple of years, and you can't be losing to Kansas when you're getting ready to do that. I think Texas wins. And then the last game of the year, Baylor. Now, this could be a huge game. The Big 12 is very interesting to me this year. I think Oklahoma, Baylor, Texas, and Oklahoma State are all capable of winning the Big 12. On top of that, I think they're all capable of running through their schedule with 1 or 2 conference losses. You could get to the end of the season and you could have 4 teams sitting on either 0, 1, or 2 conference losses. And this game at the end of the year between Texas and Baylor could be a situation where the winner goes to the Big 12 title game and the loser is eliminated. You could also find yourselves playing 2 weeks in a row, which is what I think may end up happening. However, you are playing Baylor the last game of the year, and guess what? I think you beat them. You get them at home, and I'm giving you a win over Baylor. And I'm very high on Baylor and Dave Aranda. Again, I've already done the Baylor version of this video as well. You can click back on that and watch it if you want to hear some more of my thoughts on Baylor and Dave Aranda. I definitely think Baylor is capable of winning this game. I'm giving it to Texas mainly because it's at home. It's very possible, though, you'll have a rematch with them the following week in the Big 12 title game. I think it's going to come down to 2 of those 4 teams. And I know that's kind of stating the obvious there. Texas, Oklahoma, Baylor, Oklahoma State, those are the 4 consensus best teams in the Big 12. But it's very hard to figure the Big 12 out this year. You know, for a long time, you could just pencil Oklahoma into the Big 12 title game, and all you had to do was try to figure out that second team. I think right now we're in a situation in the Big 12 where you're trying to figure out both teams. There is no team that's really guaranteed or a sure thing to make that Big 12 title game. I'm kind of leaning towards a Texas-Baylor rematch in the Big 12 title game, but I think you beat them in the regular season here at the end of the year and finish 10-2. 10-2. Is that one conference loss? Yeah, one conference loss, and that's to Oklahoma State. I lost to Alabama, non-con game at home in week 2, but again, Alabama's a top 2, top 3 program or team for 2022, depending on which polls you want to look at. I've got them at number 2 in my ranking, behind Ohio State, and I've got Georgia at 3. But so yeah, a loss at home early in the year to Alabama, a loss middle of the road or middle of the season on the road at Oklahoma State. And then you rip off 4 wins in a row after your bye week to finish 10-2 with only one conference loss and punch a ticket to the Big 12 title game against maybe Baylor, maybe a rematch against Oklahoma, or who knows, maybe even Oklahoma State. All right, don't forget to tell me how much I hate Texas. You guys have been telling me that for years, that I'm just a Texas hater. So let's keep that going in the comment section. I hate Texas. That's why I think they're going 10-2. Have a good morning.